Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast. I'm your host, Fran Duffy, and we've got a cool show today. We're going to talk about some of the best prospects in the Big 12 Conference. So Oklahoma and Texas and Iowa State and Texas Tech. A lot of those schools out in the Midwest. We're going to be talking about those here today with Tony Pauline and Ben Fennell in Draft Buzz. And then we wrap it up. We've got a good question from you at home. So we'll get things going here. I will let you guys know. Number one, college football season's right around the corner. The best way to support this show, go give us a rating, leave us a comment wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're not already subscribed, go and hit that subscribe button. We will be hitting you with content each week here throughout the college football season, always with an eye towards the NFL draft. Whether you're an Eagles fan or a fan of another team, we're covering this from a big picture standpoint, looking at these guys as they prepare for next April's draft. So this will be a lot of fun over the course of next year, over the course of the next few months. This is the second year in a row we've done it all through the college football season. I've got a lot of stuff planned for you guys, different kinds of guests. Really, really excited for a different show structure as well as we get closer and closer to the fall. All right, let's get things going here. Draft Buzz, Tony Pauline, Ben Fennell. We're talking players in the Big 12.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
Well, joining us once again for Draft Buzz, Tony Pauline. Tony, really appreciate the time once again here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. Let's talk about the Big 12. Who are the top players that we should be watching from the Midwest? And I'm going to ask you this now. The top overall prospect from the Big 12. We'll all give our thoughts on it, but who is your top prospect going into the year?
Well, I got to say, from an overall view, I think this is going to be a real down year for the Big 12. They had, 5 players selected in the top 50 last April. The year before that, you had consecutive first picks of the draft coming from April. And really, I don't have a player from the Big 12 graded him as a top 45 pick yet. But if I had to pick one guy, I like junior linebacker Kenneth Murray from Oklahoma. He's basically what everybody wants or everyone's picking these days in a linebacker. He's a little bit undersized, 6'1", probably goes a hair under 230 pounds. He plays in the high 4.5s, low 4.6s. He's fast in a straight line. He's explosive getting out in space. He's terrific in pursuit. He plays with a vicious, nasty mentality. Plays bigger than his 6'1", 229-pound frame. Terrific against the pass, terrific against pursuit. In pursuit, I should say. Shows some force up the field on the blitz. Can also cover. So, all things considered, Kenneth Murray, who would, 5 years ago would be considered an undersized, maybe weak side linebacker. I think in the day and age of linebackers who are taken highly because they can get from point A to point B as quick as possible. When I watched the film, number 9, Kenneth Murray is the guy from Oklahoma who stood out to me more than any other player in the Big 12.
Yeah, Tony, he was also my number one overall prospect in the Big 12. Became the kind of leader of the defense last year, and moving into his junior year, we'll have a new defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch, coming over from Ohio State. Was previously at Washington State. Mike Stoops leaving for Alabama, but you could see the range, the power, his ability to run sideline to sideline, and obviously finish ball carriers is definitely what he hangs his hat on. Over 150 tackles last year, but in the new scheme, I guess there's a lot of question on where he's going to play. If he's going to be the Mike and kind of the plugger, whether he can be a run and chase will linebacker, or even maybe be in a kind of a hang defender off the edge, wrestling the passer in some instances. So he's definitely a tackling machine. He plays very aggressive and can run. So a little bit of a kind of scheme fit under the new defensive coordinator.
Yeah, I actually haven't watched Murray yet, so he's a guy I don't want to necessarily go full on and comment on, but I have watched one of his teammates, and that's Neville Gallimore, the defensive tackle for the Sooners. And he's not the best player right now in the Big 12, Ben. I know you and I kind of agree on that. He's not the best player, but when I talk about what his ceiling could be, it's really exciting because you're talking about a guy who's 6'2", 305. I think he's got one gap potential in terms of his quickness off the ball, his ability to get into the backfield, but he's also really strong, and he's very violent at the point of attack. So he's got some two-gap potential. He can play at a one-gap. He can get after the quarterback. He needs to learn how to develop his pass rush plan. He's not a really polished player attacking offensive linemen right now, but a guy that can line up a number of different techniques along the defensive line. He's got the quickness. He's a freak list guy, right, with Bruce Feldman of The Athletic. He's listed in his freak list. So a guy that can win in a lot of different ways. To me, very, very intriguing player. I'd like him to stay healthy for all 13 games, so hopefully more than that for the Sooners this year, but a guy that really, really excites me because of his potential.
Interesting backstory with him as well, being a Canadian, yes. And Stoops actually braving a blizzard, I believe, to go recruit him a couple years ago. Was on the freak list in back-to-back years, so definitely has the athletic upside and the explosive element. I did one of his games last year, and Mike Stoops had said he was looking for Gallimore to start faster in games.
Yeah.
And then there was also the element on tape. I didn't think he was finishing very well.
Yep.
So obviously has the tools, just really needs to kind of refine his game and start faster in games and start to finish those plays.
So two guys that I talked to from Oklahoma this past spring at the Combine, Marquise Brown, obviously the first-round pick for the Baltimore Ravens, and then Bobby Evans, the offensive lineman. Both guys told me Gallimore is going to be the breakout player next year. You know, he's got to put it all together. Hopefully he's a guy that can reach his ceiling. All right, let's go to the top offensive senior. Tony, I bring this to you. The top offensive senior from the Big 12.
You know, when I look at the board, I'm just not impressed with the senior class, the senior offensive class from the Big 12, especially. You got a couple of offensive tackles there. I'm going to go against the grain. I like Colton McKivitz of West Virginia. I think he's been the most consistent. He's the steadiest. A quick story about Colton McKivitz. Last year I talked to Charles Menahue during the season, and he said as he prepared for the game against West Virginia, he was told that Yodny Kajust was the guy who was the best and the toughest offensive lineman from West Virginia when they played that game. If you remember that game, it went to overtime. West Virginia won in overtime. But he came out of that game just awed by Colton McKivitz. He said he was far and away the best offensive lineman he had faced all year. He was strong. He was dominant. He's consistent. I think he is a terrific right tackle prospect. I'd like to see him bend his knees a little bit more and play with more leverage. I know that scouts grade him as a fourth-round pick. I have him as a potential second-round pick. I just like the consistency. I don't think he's a great athlete. I don't think he's a guy that's going to test off the charts. But when you watch him, he's strong at the point of attack. He gets out to the second level and takes linebackers out. He's very good in pass protection, does the little things well, and gets the most from his ability. I don't think he has a high upside, but when I looked at my board, there weren't too many seniors from the offensive side of the ball in the Big 12 that have that great upside. And, you know, I don't know that we're going to see any Kyler Murrays, you know, really come out of nowhere and catch people by surprise.
Yeah, Tony, I'll join you on the tackle side of the conversation with Texas Christian left tackle Lucas Niang, who also has played some right tackle in his career, but he's a 6'7", 328 senior, really easy mover, has light feet, good play strength, can run the arc against speed rushers, fires out of his stance with a really nice leg kick. Doesn't really get a whole lot of width on his pass sets, a little bit of a vertical setter, but with that vertical set, obviously allows a lot of stunts and twists to develop in front of him, so he's able to pass those things off. And when you put on his tape last year, forget the whole season, go right to the Ohio State tape earlier in the season. You go watch him up against Nick Bosa, against Chase Young, which seems to be a consensus top 10 pick. I thought he looked like an NFL tackle in that game and really handled NFL speed and power and pitched pretty close to a shutout. Was even on the left side in some unbalanced sets. He's been training with Paul Alexander this offseason, who's a prominent NFL offensive line coach. So I think definitely Lucas Niang is putting his name into the conversation and being one of the top seniors, especially in the trenches in the Big 12.
I talked with L.J. Collier this spring at the Combine, and obviously a first-round pick for Seattle, and Collier told me that this kid is legit, with his strength, and you watch him, really heavy hands, love his ability to naturally bend. He's got some athlete. He's not a fluid, explosive athlete, but he's got really good knee bend. He's got the ability to win the leverage battle despite the fact that he's 6'6" and over 330 pounds. I like him best in a phone booth and probably more of a prototypical right tackle, but I agree that to me, Niang is my top offensive senior as well, based off the guys that I've studied so far. But McKivitz is the guy I do like, and I'm going to talk about him here in a little bit. All right, let's get to underclassmen. Tony, your most intriguing offensive underclassmen from the Big 12.
It was down to two wide receivers, and I went with Jalen Reagor, the receiver from TCU. I went with him over CeeDee Lamb of Oklahoma because, number one, he's faster. He's more of a vertical threat. He's quicker. I think he's more versatile in the sense that you can use him in the flanks. You can use him in the slot. You can use him to run reverses. I think he's got some kick return potential at the next level. He's a guy that, he does not only just have the vertical speed, but he's a good vertical receiver. You watch him down with the long passes when TCU threw the ball downfield. He catches the ball in stride, easily adjusts to the errant throw, looks the ball in. I think he's got a high upside. They don't really throw the ball all that much at TCU. It's more of a run-based offense. But when they do, it's going to Reagor, and teams have trouble stopping him. So I think he's the type of guy, he's not going to be 6 foot tall, but he's really swift, and he brings a lot of speed to the field. I've got him graded right now as a mid-third round choice. If he continues to impress, he's a third-year junior, continues to improve, and he runs really fast, I definitely think Rager is a guy that can hop into the top 60 when he enters the draft.
I believe Bruce Feldman had him under 4.3. I think it was like 4.29, which is scary speed. And Tony, it's funny you say that. I actually had both CD Lamb and Jalen Rager as the two guys that I would have liked to talk about. So I'm glad you brought up Rager. If to steal a scouting term that people will say. I've got them both on the board. They're both of the tags are touching. I've got them really, really close, and I really like CD Lamb a lot. Rieger is a guy really explosive, and I think he's a better route runner than Lamb is right now. I give Lamb the edge in terms of his toughness and play strength and his ability to play the ball in the air. But really, you look at Rager, he's got the ability to be a gadget guy as a minimum. I think he's got the ability to be a vertical receiver. Wasn't really given the opportunity to do that as much. I thought the quarterback play was a little inconsistent with TCU last year, but he shows some advanced skills as a route runner, does a good job working in blind spots, getting corners to kind of flip their hips, and he can win the leverage battle downfield. He does a great job attacking and pushing the vertical stem, trying to create that initial separation. I think Rager has got a lot of ability. I really like him. But CeeDee Lamb, Ben, you and I have talked about him, a guy that I don't throw these these comparisons around lightly. He reminds me of Nuke Hopkins, because of the way that he plays the ball in the air. He's not the biggest guy, 6'2", 189, but his ability to just go up and win it's unique.
Yeah, you could see obviously the body type comp with the Nuke Hopkins there being a little bit under 6'3" and kind of having that long upright frame with long arms and can play above the rim, make some incredible catches along the sideline just as well.
Yep. All right, so to Ben, who do you got?
Lamb he is a terrific downfield blocker.
Yeah,
I mean, in that spread offense, where they throw a lot of receiver screens, Kyler Murray was running the ball. If you really watch the film, there were a number of times where Lamb was able to get significant and important blocks down the field, seal open the running lanes for the ball carrier, Sermon, or even Kyler Murray.
Who's yours, Ben?
So my intriguing offensive underclassmen, as much as I wanted to talk about Grant Calcaterra, the big move tight end at Oklahoma.
You've been talking about him since he was a freshman.
Reminds me a lot of a Zach Ertz or Tyler Eifert's, made some really impressive catches in the red zone. Just threw that in there to try to talk about him for a second. But I'll stay in the receiver category with you guys and go with Oklahoma State receiver Tylan Wallace.
Another good one.
Another one from that impressive 2017 recruiting class with Henry Ruggs, Jerry Jeudy, Sanault. Very deep recruiting class in 2017, but he's 6 foot, 185, had 1,400 yards last year, 12 touchdowns, lines up primarily on the offense's right side, rolls off the line of scrimmage, good at beating press coverage, and for only being 6 feet tall, he makes some very impressive catches at the catch point, maneuvering along the sideline, very competitive at the catch point, will open up on some back shoulders, a lot of great catches over the middle of the field, some digs, some daggers, will take some hits on slants. Very impressive with his play strength, considering he's only 6 foot and under 190 pounds. But when you start looking at these numbers, 10-yard receptions, he had 63 last year, most in the country. 20-yard receptions, he had 25, second most in the country. This is an explosive receiver that can win down the field. My one question going into 2019 is the quarterback. Taylor Cornelius, who made a lot of those big throws to him last year, is not there anymore. They have two quarterbacks working it out right now that are a little bit undersized, so I'm just a little bit concerned about their ability to get the ball to him down the field. But 1,400 yards, 12 touchdowns, a bit of a one-hit wonder, but obviously has the upside and the ability.
All right, well, let's flip the script here. Let's go over to the defensive side. Tony, the top defensive senior in the Big 12 is?
On my board, it's A.J. Green of Oklahoma State, the cornerback, a guy who I have just seen consistent progress the past 2 years. He's got NFL size, 6'1", 195. He's going to run in the 4.4s. A lot of scouts have him graded as a potential early third-round pick. I think right now he's a top 60 selection. He's got terrific ball skills. If you watched the game against Texas last year, he hammered Colin Johnson, who had a major size advantage on A.J. Green. I think he's very good making plays with his back to the ball, which is something that is unusual for college cornerbacks. Doesn't do a lot of face guarding, gets his head back around to locate the pass in the air, knows what's happening, has good football instincts besides the size and the ball skills. I think when you look at the importance of cornerback, when you look at his size, if he takes his game to a next level, which I think is absolutely possible, especially in that conference, I think you could see A.J. Green as a potential top 45 pick next April.
Yeah, I'm going to stay at the cornerback position. I'm going to go with Jeff Gladney, and a guy that comes in with a pretty high billing. He was on Bruce Feldman's freak list. He had him at a 4.3, 440, squatting 620, benching 400 for a 183-pound corner. It's pretty impressive numbers. But you watch him. I don't know that I don't know he plays to that speed. And so that's probably one of my big concerns with him going into the year. But this is a quick kid who really excels in off coverage. He's a really smart zone defender, and he's pretty competitive too. So I look at Jeff Gladney as a guy that, look, I don't know that I'm looking at the highest upside, maybe not even a first or second corner, but a guy that I think could come in and be a third corner for a team, whether it's on the outside or from the inside. I think he's got a skill set that transitions well to the nickel. Was second team all-conference a year ago. My guess is with the clout that he's kind of built up, he'll probably be first team all Big 12 this year.
You know, it's kind of tough to find a defensive senior. It doesn't seem like it's as deep of a group this year. There isn't that stud edge rusher or, a corner on the back end. A.J. Green is a guy I really liked, 11 PBUs last year, 4 picks the year before. You could see the ball skills. But there's 2 linebackers I have my eyes on that I think are just absolutely tackling machines. And I think this year they're going to really crank up those totals and kind of get themselves in the national spotlight. And that's senior Clay Johnston at Baylor and Jordan Brooks at Texas Tech. Both kind of prototypical size, 6'1", 235. I really like Jordan Brooks. He was the team's leading tackler as a freshman and last year as a junior. Plays all over the place as an off-ball, as a hang defender. Plays kind of a halfway player out in space. Makes a lot of plays out to the numbers and the sideline. 2 guys that can run and chase and just crank up a lot of tackles. So I think if they stay healthy and stay on the field, these guys are each going to be around 130, 140 tackles. I expect them both to kind of get the call up to the Senior Bowl and really see what they can do in front of NFL eyes.
All right, well, let's get to the underclassmen ranks. Tony, the most intriguing defensive underclassman in the Big 12, who do you got?
I like Trey Norwood of Oklahoma. I'm going to go back to the cornerback position. He's got average size, he's a tall guy, but he's a little bit thin. But he's got terrific speed. He's very effective facing the action. You can use him backed off the line of scrimmage. You can use him in zone. He covers a lot of area. His play has been a little bit spotty, but when he's playing at his upper level, he's a guy that shut down opponents. Does have some lapses in concentration. Only going to be a third-year junior, so when I was watching him last year, was a second-year sophomore in a defensive secondary that was really loaded a year ago at Oklahoma. A couple of guys have moved on. So I think he's going to move into the starting spot on a consistent basis, play with the first team this year. I like his upside. I like his athleticism. Just a matter of Trey Norwood of Oklahoma polishing his ball skills.
All right, well, I'm going to go back to TCU, and it's a team that obviously defensively they're known, right? Under Gary Patterson, they're known for their defensive talent. I'm going to go with defensive tackle Ross Blacklock, who really, coming into last year, he was going to be a redshirt sophomore in 2018. Then he suffered an injury during, it was about a year ago. It was during preseason camp, so he missed all of last season. Comes back this year. I went back, Ben, you and I recently watched him from 2017. A lot of people, and I said this to Ben as I was watching, a lot of people really love Derek Brown, right, from Auburn, a guy that a lot of people feel is a first-round pick. I think their games are pretty similar in terms of what they bring from, the positives and negatives. And I look at Blacklock, 6'4". He was listed 329. Apparently, he's lost a bunch of weight, so we'll see what he looks like this year in terms of, his skill set. But a guy that I thought was really strong at the point of attack, has the ability to win in the run game. Want to continue to see how he can do as a pass rusher, and can he offer that kind of a value. But a guy that, to me, is a very, very intriguing player, a fun player to watch. I liked him a lot on tape.
Yeah, it was previously listed closer to 330. Apparently, he's playing closer to 300.
Yep.
Which is great to see after having a year-long injury. Sometimes those weights can really go up and down, and I'm glad it's for the better. But seems to be a bit of a changing of the guard there at TCU on the defensive side of the ball. We, like you had mentioned, watched some tape of Blacklock from 2017. Arkansas tape, Stanford tape, 2 very pro-style offenses that
against
I thought
good linemen too.
And he was a true freshman, and I thought he really handled himself pretty well against those big offensive lines. But I'm going to stay on the TCU trend here. And now that we have L.J. Collier gone, Ty Summers gone, Ben Banago gone, that's 18 sacks from last year gone off the defense. Obviously, Blacklock is going to get a couple of those, but they had a guy step up last year in place of Blacklock in Corey Bethley. Okay. He's a junior. He's 6'2". 290, hit 5 sacks last year, 10 tackles for loss. He'll play some 1-tech, he'll play some 3-tech. But when you really watch this kid in a vacuum, he's got great balance, he's got great hand usage, he's got a variety of tricks in getting after the passer. Definitely more of a pass rush upsider than a run stopper. Plays a great effort, hustles to the ball, will chase plays down the field. Just a guy that really flashed on tape in the trenches there. Being 6'2", 290, he moves a little bit better than some of those run pluggers on that front in Gary Patterson's defense. I just think there's production to be had this year on that defense. And I think guys like Blacklock and Bethley are going to really increase those sack totals, and they could have 2 double-digit sack guys in these 2 players.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see that new look TCU defense this year up front. All right, Tony, the biggest sleeper in the Big 12. Who you got for the 2020 NFL Draft?
I'm going to give you a twofer, actually, both from the University of Texas, both in the defensive back 7. Brandon Jones, the safety, a guy who I've liked for a couple of years now. Some scouts grade him as a 6th-rounder. Some have him as an early 2nd-rounder. Right now I got him as a 3rd-round choice. Decent size, 5'11", 200 pounds. Plays the run tough. Very good against the pass. Not a guy that's got great ball skills, a safety that you're going to consider moving over to cornerback. But he has the range and he has the ability to play free safety, to go sideline to sideline, and doesn't make bad plays when the ball's in the air. And then his teammate, outside linebacker Jeffrey McCullough, who scouts grade as a street free agent, but when you watch him play, 6'2", 245 pounds, runs and plays in the 4.7s, a smart guy, very instinctive, very explosive, covers a lot of area on the field, very, very good in space, solid against the run, but also gets good depth on his pass drops. I've seen a couple of plays where he was really good when the ball's in the air. So I think McCullough, who really has been dismissed by scouts, is a guy who has the measurables and has the ability. It's just a matter of him being more consistent. And Brandon Jones, if he pulls together a complete game, and Texas lets him do a little bit more when the ball's in the air, because Texas usually uses their safeties sort of in a downhill zone type manner, I think Brandon Jones could also really help himself this upcoming season.
Yeah, pretty good track record of Texas safeties coming out of the tier over the last 10 years. But we don't get to talk about the University of Kansas a whole lot. But it's the new era over there. We have Les Miles in there as the head coach. And I'm going to talk about their left tackle, Hakeem Adeniji. And he's a senior. He's 6'4", 303. He's got an 84-inch wingspan, massive arms. Started 36 games at left tackle and right tackle over the last 3 seasons. But he's got a new staff, new offensive line coach. They even tried him out at center in the springtime, which he isn't really a prototypical fit there. It sounds like he's going to go back to his spot at left tackle for the season. But he's got those long arms. He's got good strength, good grip strength and torque when he gets his hands on you. Good initial quickness and feet to run the arc. And I'm really interested to see the pairing with this running back, Puka Williams, who had 1,000 yards last year, was quietly one of the more explosive and productive running backs in the Big 12, up there with Justice Hill and some of those other slashers in the backfield. But I just think Adeniji isn't a guy that isn't going to be on a national contending team or maybe even have a bowl game, but he's a guy that could get a call up to the Senior Bowl and really impress some scouts with his length and his size.
Yeah, Puka Williams, if he can stay on the field, I know there's some off the field issues there.
Yeah.
Hopefully, everything's okay from that standpoint. But go over to a guy we actually talked about earlier, and that Tony, I believe he was your number 1 senior in the Big 12, and that's Colton McKivitz, a guy that I view a little bit of a sleeper because not a lot of people are talking about him. Last year, you mentioned it. Everyone talked about the left tackle. I actually kind of liked McKivitz a little bit more over on the right side, 6'6", 310, upcoming redshirt senior. I wanted to see him get stronger. He didn't have a great anchor on film, but former high school basketball player, was actually all-state in the state of Ohio back in high school, but light feet, knows how to use his length. I want to see him continue to improve. But if he can keep developing his body, I see a future starter at left tackle or right tackle. Obviously, Liadni Kajust, the left tackle for the Mountaineers last year. All right, most to prove, Tony. Who has the most to prove of any player, any prospect in the Big 12 this year?
On my board, it's going to be Terrence Steele, the left tackle for Texas Tech. I mean, there are some scouts that grade him as a top 75 pick. I just don't see it. I mean, the guy's got excellent size at 6'6", 305 pounds. He's got incredibly long arms, but he's not really athletic. He's not really fluid, doesn't bend all that well, doesn't show great footwork and pass protection, plays left tackle. Is he going to be able to stay there at the next level? Is he going to do enough to stay in the top 100? These are questions that when I watch Terrence Steele play, I like him, and I've graded him as a mid last day pick, but I just don't see him as the top 75 choice that a lot of scouts have stamped him with yet.
Yeah, my most approved is actually going to go back to one of your more talented players in the conference. That's Jalen Rieger at Texas.
You're a hater.
Texas Christian. I just think he's a little bit in between positions right now.
Yeah.
I think he should be used more like a gadget in the backfield, find easier ways to get him the ball. I thought his reps as a slot receiver left a little bit to be desired. I thought he struggled in some contested catch situations. I thought when the ball got on him quick, he had a couple concentration drops. And I'm just a little bit concerned on throwing these verticals outside the numbers to a 5'11 receiver. So I'd like to see him used over the middle of the field more. I see a Curtis Samuel style of player. I see a Brandon Cook style of player, but I've also seen, the DJ Fosters of the world and the kid from Virginia last year, Zacchaeus, who's a similar type of down the field gadget player.
Apparently he's having a good camp, by the way.
Yeah, I've heard. And also the thing with TCU, I thought the quarterback did not do him any favors last year.
No,
I just think they weren't able to get on the same page with accuracy, and Rieger could end up being a better pro if he gets with a good, accurate quarterback. He knows how to get himself open. I just think he needs to prove his positional fit for scouts at the next level.
Yeah, I like Rieger, and I think he's got a lot of ability, obviously, and I think he showed a little bit more from as a route runner than I expected to, based off what I had known going in. I'm going to stick at receiver, and I'm going to stick in the state of Texas. I'm going to go with Colin Johnson, who was obviously one of the biggest names coming back to the entire country this year. I mean, 6'5", 221 pounds, a unique size for a wide receiver. We've had this discussion a lot about big receivers in the NFL draft. Do they go a little bit lower than where people project? I mean, everybody thought Hakeem Butler was going to be a first-round pick or a second-round pick, ends up falling to the fourth round. I think when you look at Colin Johnson, you see a guy with great size. He shows flashes as a route runner. I want to see a little bit more consistency at the catch point. I think he's got to prove himself in terms of his speed and quickness. There are times where he looked really efficient at the top of a route. There are other times where he didn't look so efficient. That might be a route running aspect. It might be a physical limitation. So I want to continue to see more. Obviously, a very accomplished player. To me, I looked at him as like a Devin Funchess type of player. And, it's easy to say. You look at these big receivers. There's only a few of them right now that you point to that if you're not a freak athlete, if you're not a Julio Jones, A.J. Green, one of those guys, you're going to get the same set of comps, and Funchess is one of those guys. I look at Colin Johnson as the guy. No more little Jordan Humphrey. You've got Devin Duvernay on the other side. I actually like Duvernay a little bit, different kind of skill set. But Colin Johnson, to me, big boy receiver. Go play big boy football. I want to see you dominate at the catch point this year. All right, newcomer.
It's not just big receivers. It's big receivers from the Big 12.
Right.
I mean, you mentioned little Jordan Humphrey, Hakeem Butler, Alan Lazard. I mean, it's. These guys are 6'5", and they've got a size advantage, but they can't run. They got no quickness. They've got no ability to separate. All they do is basically physically. And I like Colin Johnson as a receiver, and he came into the season with huge grades from scouts who think he's a potential top 40 choice. But I just think you've got to learn from experience. And the guys I just mentioned, all from the same conference, all similar type of players, really, except for Hakeem Johnson, who obviously was a fourth-round pick this year. Didn't make a dent in the NFL draft.
Yeah, well, that's a very good point. All right, Tony, let's go last category now. Newcomer on the scene. Who's a guy, whether it's a transfer or someone that's replacing a draft pick, a new player, junior college player. Who's the newcomer on the scene for you in the Big 12?
Well, I think this is a name that's going to be redundant amongst the three of us. It's got to be Jalen Hurts. I mean, he's going to have his opportunity now. He's going to have another opportunity at Oklahoma to run that wide-open system. He did well last year when he replaced Tagliavoa in the SEC title game. He came through for the Crimson Tide. He's got decent grades by scouts. I mean, scouts right now have graded him as a late fourth round selection, which is pretty good considering that some people said he was never going to be an NFL prospect, not when he was after his freshman season. So I think in that system that is so wide open. And really with defenses that are not that good, especially from the pass rush point of view, Jalen Hurts is the newcomer, and he's going to have his opportunities this year at Oklahoma.
Yeah, to me, it's Jalen Hurts. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Yeah, there was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year as a freshman in 2016. Every list you would see from that season, he was at the top of it. 6'1", just over 220 pounds. How is he going to look in this offense? Because this is a guy that I think a lot of the questions people had, can he win from the pocket? Can he win as a thrower? Is he that kind of player, or is he a run-first quarterback? That's been the kind of the knock on him. And you watch them early in his career, there's a reason why they felt confident saying, you know what, it's a national title game. This guy won us one a year ago. He took us here to the second one. Let's go to Tua. I think that there's something to that. I will also say, too, I'll be interested to follow this narrative with him going into the draft next year. how many people, if he puts up big numbers in this system with Lincoln Riley, will say, yeah, but let's go back to the Alabama film. Let's go back to when it was more of a pro-style look. And they weren't all pro-style last year, but even to the early stuff, how did he look in that kind of a system? Well, we'll see. I'm a big Jalen Hurts fan, though. Just for to me, like one of the most inspiring, stories. Like for my son when he's older, like to say like that's how you're, if you want to be a good teammate, like that's what. Go look at Jalen Hurts. Read about Jalen Hurts. To me, like what he did over the last 18 months at Alabama. That's awesome. That's great.
I'm interested to see how he's getting incorporated to the offense because I don't think he's the passer of a Baker Mayfield.
Or Kyler.
I don't think his arm is as live as Kyler. I don't think he's the explosive athlete that Kyler was, but he's a little bit of everything there. So I'm interested to see on what play personality he ends up using in the offense. But I'll mix it up just a little bit.
Okay.
This offensive lineman, Parker Braun, is a grad transfer to the University of Texas, coming from Georgia Tech. He had started 32 of the last 36 games, was a 2-time first-team All-ACC, 3-time All-Academic. He was a freshman All-American a couple of years ago. He got on Phil Steele's list as a first-team preseason All-Big 12. So he's a guy that's going to show up to Texas. And
nice pick.
Yeah,
Right.
He's new on the scene there. There's all these other transfers and freshmen around the country, but a grad transfer looking like he's going to come in and start right away. I think he has a chance to kind of work his name into being maybe a day 2 conversation offensive lineman.
He would have been seen as a huge project going into the NFL if he had gone last year.
Right.
Now going to Texas, he'll be
It does a lot
more
for his stock.
stuff.
Obviously,
No
you could see his scheme at Georgia Tech. The triple option obviously is no more, but going over to Texas and just a different scheme will give scouts another kind of view on what he can do in NFL offenses.
Well, Tony, we're back next week for the Pac-12, our final conference preview. Looking forward to chatting with you about the West Coast guys next week.
We'll speak with you then.
Well, just great stuff there from both Tony and from Ben, and you can count on hearing from both of them on a weekly basis this year on the Journey to the Draft podcast once again. We'll start every episode this year with our Saturday scouting segment with Ben. Ben's going to be going on the road very soon here for college football games every single week, so we'll be talking about not only his matchup, where he's going this week, but also who he saw a week ago, some of the other big storylines around the college football world, and then also Tony bringing the heat. He's always got some nuggets throughout the course of the calendar year. Tony is the best because he is always breaking stuff about who's going to declare, who's rising up boards. He'll break it so early in the fall that by the time the news actually hits later, people will break it again because they forget that Tony did it weeks before, or sometimes months beforehand. Tony, one of the best in the biz in terms of being able to release that knowledge way before the rest of the media. So, Tony, always a welcome guest here on the Journey to the Draft podcast. All right, we have one question. Like I said earlier, the number one way to support the show, and really when I say that, what does that mean, support the show? To get us boosted up the rankings so that when other people, when they're looking for similar kinds of content, similar kinds of podcasts, they say, hey, this Journey to the Draft podcast, what's this about? It's boosted up the rankings, so you'll see it more frequently and earlier than other shows. The best way for that to happen is for you to leave a rating and leave a comment. It shows Apple Podcasts and Stitcher, all those other platforms, hey, these people are listening to the show and they like it. So if you want to support the show, really, I ask you, do exactly what Richard did. Richard went on, left that 5-star rating. He's left a 5-star rating before, but leaves a comment, leaves a question. Then we answer it here on the show. And here's Richard's question, and it goes to what we just finished talking about with Tony and Ben. Do you see a role for Jalen Hurts in the NFL? If so, what would it be? Thank you, Fran. So when I look at Jalen Hurts personally, I haven't done a full study of him, but I will say, having studied Alabama prospects over the last few years, they've had a few guys coming out into the NFL over the last 3 years since he's been on campus. I've struggled trying to see the projection for Jalen as a quarterback to the NFL, especially early on. Now, I do want to go back and watch the mop-up duty from last year, watch him when he stepped in when Tua got hurt late in the season. I haven't studied that as of yet, but we're going to see a big dose of Jalen Hurts in this offense here with Lincoln Riley in Oklahoma. He's going to operate an offense that's a little bit different. Things are very well defined, and that was one of the knocks for Baker Mayfield and for Kyler Murray. Things are very well defined for the quarterback in this offense with Lincoln Riley, and they do a great job. It's outstanding coaching, outstanding game planning, finding matchups, getting receivers open, making things a little bit easier for them to get through progressions and find the open receiver. I think when you look at Jalen Hurts, he's going to benefit from that, but we're going to see the arm talent. Does he have the ability to make all the throws in an NFL offense? And does he have the ability to play within structure, play within the pocket, go through reads, first and second and third progressions, and find the open receiver? Even if it is a little bit simpler in that scheme, it will be good to see him operate that at a high level. Because remember, you go back to like a Jared Stidham, right? Back in this past spring, coming out of Auburn. By the way, Stidham has looked great so far, at least from what I've seen from preseason action with the New England Patriots. The question with Stidham was, hey, he's operating an offense that in NFL terms, very, very simple, right? Very simple with what they were asking the quarterback to do. And he didn't execute the offense always to a very high level. So that was the question. It's like, look, this guy's got all the talent in the world, but this is a simple offense, and he's not doing a great job executing it. What's the disconnect here? If we could see Jalen Hurts go to Oklahoma and operate that offense at a high level, he doesn't necessarily need to win the Heisman like the two guys did in the past 2 years, but if he can continue to operate that offense, keep that well-oiled machine going with threats like Grant Calcaterra and CeeDee Lamb and the rest of the weapons there in that Sooner offense, I think that will do a lot for him. Tony said that some scouts already see him in the 4th round. We'll see if he goes a little bit later than that, or if he's able to boost his stock a little bit. That'll be one of the big storylines, of course, going into this college football season. All right, I think that'll do it. Another show in the books here for the Journey to the Draft podcast. It's been a lot of fun. We've got one more conference preview next week. We're going to go out west to the Pac-12. That's where the Eagles dug in for their 1st-round pick in Andre Dillard, one of their 2nd-round picks in J.J. Arcega-Whiteside. We'll see if they decide to go back out west. Who are the big players out there on the left coast? We'll talk about that next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast.